is actually with us. The leaks are all over as we are speaking at the moment. And part of the aims of the 2030 term extension bill is to take away the power from the people of Zimbabwe and give it to the Parliament of Zimbabwe, elected members of Parliament as well as the senators to actually elect a new president. Mnangagwa doesn't want to be elected by people anymore. It has been a nightmare. Not only that, the bill also aims at thwarting retired General Chiwenga's potential to be the president, and I will be explaining why. Not only that, the bill also targets the Zimbabwe Defense Forces not to implement any coup. It actually potentially makes any coup that could be implemented by the Zimbabwe Defense Force as an unlawful activity. It targets the registration of voters. Mnangagwa does not want the registration of voters to be done by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. He wants to return it back to the National Registry. This is what was done before so there are numerous sweeping constitutional changes that could potentially take place. The bill is scheduled, I think, to be presented today to the cabinet sitting of today, Tuesday. Greetings and welcome to your lovely channel, the Hlonipani Global News. If you're watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. There are quite a number of issues regarding this bill that I will be talking about. You know, my live broadcast doesn't have to be too much. It's just I make it a point that I make them as short as possible so that it's easier to listen to them. So let me just read part of the things so that I do not actually miss this. So the government is preparing sweeping constitutional amendments that would extend presidential terms to 7 years and direct presidential elections and fundamentally reshape the country's succession framework. Justice Minister Ziyambi is expected to table a memorandum to the cabinet on Tuesday, I think it must be today, outlining the proposed Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Bill 2026, which introduces far-reaching changes to the country's governance system and institutional architecture. One of the most significant proposals is the repeal of Section 92 of the Constitution to allow the President to be elected by a joint sitting of Parliament instead through a direct popular vote. So the President will be now elected, if this nonsense becomes lawful, by a joint sitting of Parliament, just like what happens in South Africa. So which means a vice president would not, or you will see that a vice president would not automatically succeed the president. It is the parliament which has powers to determine who takes over. So after Mnangagwa is removed from power, potentially they could be a chaos due to competition. The new laws that will be introduced will make it quite difficult for retired General Chiwenga to automatically act even as a president. He would have to be elected through a joint sitting. You could tell that this is targeting, this is earmarked at actually stopping him from becoming the next president after Mnangagwa. Under the leaked draft that we currently have, members of the National Assembly and Senate will elect the president by majority vote following general elections or whenever a vacancy arises. The bill seeks to extend the term of office for both the President and Parliament from 5 to 7 years, a move which could allow President Mnangagwa, currently serving his second and final term under existing constitutional limits, to remain in office for an additional 2 years, from 2028 to 2030. Now, the memorandum argues that long terms would reduce what it describes as election mode toxicity and allow more time for government programs to be implemented, framing the change as necessary for stability and policy continuity. Lawyers have argued that such constitutional amendments may require approval through a public referendum, but Ziambi has publicly declared that a referendum will not be necessary. A constitutional court application allegedly sponsored by ZANU-PF and fronted by Matebeleland Pressure Group, Ipe Churigazulu, and its Secretary General Mbuso Fuzwa is set to be heard after the group was granted direct access in an unopposed application on Monday. The question of whether a referendum is required to pass the amendment is expected to be central to the case, which could be determined before Chief Justice Luke Malaba Mnangagwa Ben retires on May 14. The government's proposals are expected to trigger intense political debate, with critics warning that removing presidential elections could dilute citizens' role in choosing their leader and further centralize power within parliament, where ZANU-PF holds a dominant majority. The amendment opens up the possibility of an unpopular but wealthy politicians becoming president by buying MPs' loyalty. The draft amendment also significantly alter presidential succession rules, potentially reshaping internal political dynamics within the ruling party. Exactly what I was saying. If the president is elected by the members of the parliament, this is potentially meant to target issues of ZANU-PF succession disputes, specifically earmarking retired General Chiwenga. Listen to this. Instead of a vice president automatically assuming office following a vacancy, the bill proposes that the parliament elect a new president within a specific period after the death, resignation, or removal of an incumbent. Analysts say the change could undercut the traditional advantage enjoyed by a sitting vice president and open succession to broader political contestation, a shift likely to fuel speculation about succession politics within ZANU-PF, where Vice President Constantino Chiwenga has frequently been viewed as a potential successor to Mnangagwa. In another controversial provision, the bill proposes increasing the size of the Senate by allowing the President to appoint an additional 10 senators chosen for their professional skills and competencies, further expanding presidential influence within Parliament. The draft legislation also proposes abolishing the Zimbabwe Gender Commission and transferring its functions to the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, since the latter is already mandated to protect all human rights. The bill would also repeal constitutional provisions establishing the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. Additional changes include transferring responsibility for voter registration, listen to this, and the custody of the voters' roll from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, ZAC, to the Registrar General, and allowing traditional leaders to participate in partisan politics by repealing existing constitutional restrictions requiring traditional leaders not to engage in politics violates their political rights. Ziambi argues in the memorandum. So partly also this bill include also allowing the chiefs to automatically be ZANU-PF members. When they say to politically participate, don't think they will allow them to join opposition. This will actually make the chiefs to actively participate in political activities under ZANU-PF, not opposition political parties. The government also plans to amend the functions of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. Exactly what I was saying. If you look at this heading, this bill targets number one is Chiwenga. Its succession makes it quite complex and very, very difficult. It makes him to compete with individuals if it happens with individuals like Gudawashe Takwere and others to succeed Mnangagwa. So the government also plans to amend the functions of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces by replacing their duty to uphold this constitution with wording requiring them to act in accordance with the constitution. So they will change the wording, the same wording that was used to remove Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Emerson Tambutso Mnangagwa sees it as a threat. So now they want to change that clause so that it makes it impossible to actually initiate a coup or a future coup, but will the military be restricted by just what is written on a white paper? Ziambi argues in the memorandum that the constitutional amendment will reinforce constitutional governance, strengthen democratic structures, clarify institutional mandates, and harmonize Zimbabwe's constitutional order with tested and successful practices in other progressive jurisdictions. If adopted, the proposals would represent the most extensive overhaul of Zimbabwe's constitutional framework since the current constitution was enacted in 2013. So you could see Mnangagwa is targeting everything that stands on his way. Who is standing on his way? It is Chiwenga. He has been targeted by this bill. Who is standing on his way? It is the military. It has been targeted through this bill. Who is standing also? What is standing also on the way of Emerson Tambutso Mnangagwa? It is to be elected by people. This time around, he doesn't want to be elected by people. He wants to be elected by parliament and senators. Also, he wants to extend his term of office. He wants to extend, so term of office would be extended, which means if you are serving 2 years, 2 terms, it would be 14 years now. That is what Mnangagwa is doing. And also, he is targeting even the registration of voters. It was becoming difficult to rig elections under ZEC. That is why ZEC would not produce the voters' roll. So now they want to, it was easier. They noted that it was the mammoth task when they were taking the voters' roll through the National Registry Office, the one that issues passport and as well as national IDs and birth certificates. So now, even if you don't go and register to vote, you could potentially find your name in the voters' roll. Even if you are dead, you could potentially find your name in the voters' roll. It's meant to actually make it easier for ZANU-PF to rig elections. So that is why also the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is stripped of powers. Traditional leaders also, Mnangagwa is saying you should now join politics. And he is, I wonder, is it constitutional in the first place for a bill to actually because this is changing a constitution through one bill. No, I mean, how many aspects of the constitution would be changed? Oh, thank you very much. We will continue looking into this. This is just an introduction. So if you want to actually follow through the live updates today, I've decided to do a playlist these days. If it's politics, you will see it in the politics section. If it's gospel music, it will be in the gospel section. If it's whatever programs, because we will be introducing diverse programs on this channel. So today we will be actually zeroing in into the political activities that are consequential and could potentially reshape Zimbabwe's political landscape. Thank you very much for watching us. If you are watching us for the very first time, please don't forget to subscribe. You can also financially support this channel by pressing the join button and be part of our members who are the heartbeat of this channel. You can equally do so by pressing the thanks button and send us stars. Umhlabane is signing off.